Welcome back to NeuroSpicy at Work. If the last conversation was a treat because Professor Dr. Kirby has given us some very pregnant food for thought, today we are speaking to someone who is genuinely all heart, burning for the topic of how is it that we can have better, more inclusive leadership. How is it that we can have an appreciation of neurodiversity at work? And what is it that autistic quality of life should look like? Becca has been, as she will tell us herself, diagnosed a few years back. And over the last 10 plus years, she has led a very valiant battle of bettering the lives and the experiences of the groups of us that are identifying, self-identifying, diagnosed, undiagnosed, awaiting diagnosis, and being on the spectrum. Becca is also a LinkedIn top voice. I know as another LinkedIn top voice that means she comes in contact with many, many people in the LinkedIn sphere, so she sees everything to do with the way that autism unfolds in the workplace. So let's listen to what Becca has to say about the new generations, the importance of being authentic in your leadership, and how we do or do not embrace the word disability when it comes to our existence on the spectrum. Come back next week so you hear from another specialist who is part of an autistic family himself and the father of an autistic lovely young boy. Hello everyone and welcome back, hopefully, to NeuroSpicy at Work. And I have a really special guest today that I'm really pleased to be speaking to. We've had a starting conversation that I'm displeased for you guys not to have heard because it was really good. But I have invited Becca Hector today to talk to us about everything that she has seen in her many years of solid and incredibly useful advocacy in understanding autism, not only at work, but in society in general. So thank you for accepting the invitation and welcome to the show, Becca.
My pleasure. I'm really excited to be here and talk about this topic. It is certainly something that I think about most of my time when I'm awake, because I am thinking about these things.
That is the things that we get to mull over in our heads, and God knows that we are nothing if not very serious overthinkers these days. So let me start with a question: are you happy to disclose, and if so, where would you place yourself on the spectrum?
Yeah, I am happy to disclose. You can Google me and know that, so there's no point in lying. And so, yes, I was diagnosed about 11, almost 12 years ago, back when we were still using Asperger's. So at the time, I was diagnosed with Asperger's, but I was so glad when everybody got together and I could just say autism. I was so happy. So I am proudly autistic, and I have been advocating almost since the beginning of my diagnosis for just under 10 years now.
That's a very long time for anyone that's listening to this and has kind of just stumbled upon the idea of being neurospicy. You know it's not been too long that these things have been fought for. These are the years in which we've started to even discuss them. To be very honest, right? If we cast our minds back 15 years in the workplace, and we were in the workplace back in that time, there was not one corporate entity that was very clearly asking you whether or not you needed any accommodation. Wouldn't you say that things have drastically changed overall?
I think this is a hard piece though, so I want to say it carefully. We have a lot of work to still do. So no matter what I say, we still have a lot of work to do, right? It is not finished. But when I think back to when I started, we didn't even have conversations about disclosure and accommodation. Like when I started, we didn't even talk about that. We weren't just at a place where autistics were learning to have a voice for ourselves. We were all just collecting for the first time on Facebook and all of those social media sites, and connecting with each other across the globe. And so we were just, a lot of us at that time were just figuring out we weren't alone for the first time, right? There were others of us out there. And then we sort of went through this growth period where we gained this huge voice. And very much as autistics are known to do, we took advantage of technology to build our own community, to give ourselves a voice. and it's making its way into the shared spaces of the world, which is the workplace is one of them, right? We have many shared spaces, but the workplace is probably the most important one for adults, right? So we're getting places, not as fast as any of us would like, right? And probably not in my lifetime, but I know we're making movement and I know we're getting forward. And I sit and I look back at all of the advocates that are coming up and I just think, wow, I used to be able to name all the advocates. Now I don't even know who they all are anymore. So it's a good deal. We're growing. We've got a nice, strong voice.
I think that is true. That is really, really good, isn't it? Although, coming from someone who has been through two or three industries, it's never pleasant to have newcomers believe that they can just take a word and run away with it. And then, but in this particular case, and I know that, I step on people's toes. I'm new to the advocacy and so on, although I've been autistic long enough to not be new to anything. Uh, but with that said, I think this particular topic is not one where it does matter how many of us talk about it. In fact, everyone should talk about it. I don't think there's anyone who shouldn't talk about it, because if it comes to numbers, and I ask that of everyone, do you think there's more autistic people in the world or less autistic people in the world? Are we equal with the neurotypicals or not?
Right. And I think that's a really interesting question because that's about self-awareness too, right? And so I'm certain that if we were able to, with like, I don't know, a litmus test, find out if someone was autistic, we would probably see a 50-50. That would be my guess.
Mind you.
But our reality is not that, right? The reality is that there's a very large percentage of autistics out there that do not know that they are autistic, or they know and they've only self-identified, so they're not counted in all the big numbers, right? And so what we have right now, I think, is that those of us that are self-aware are lesser than,
Right.
is what I want to say, right? There's less numbers, but I think as that's that shift that we see in the
Yeah.
count, right? Where everyone says, "Oh, it's an epidemic." No, it's not an epidemic. Our diagnosis got better, right? Or we gained knowledge, right? And so now we know more, so we do, right? That's what we're seeing, and I
Right.
think that number will continue to go in the same direction as we learn to quantify. What does that mean, right? Is being autistic really that different? Well, not if 50% of us are.
Right.
Right.
Maybe
So,
that's a
like,
different one.
right. And so I think that's our growth. That's where we're headed with the research, with, what we're looking at in terms of the reality of our lives and the quality of our lives. We're getting better. And the fact is that we did a really poor job for a very long time for people.
Very, very true. And scary. I think what's interesting is something you touched on earlier, which is you've called work to one of the shared spaces, and obviously we survive as humans in multiple instances and in multiple contexts. And when it comes to our autism, unfortunately, those contexts are not as easily separable as they are for other people. So this idea of greater suffering in intersectionality is unfortunately a very pregnant one, in the sense that should you be autistic, it isn't only in the workplace that you have to decide on this disclosure. It isn't only in the workplace that you have to be wary of people's reaction to you. It isn't in every other social situation you're faced with the same thing. So I think the title of this podcast is NeuroSpicy at Work, and we try to talk about adaptation. And I am obsessed with how many undisclosed leaders afraid there are out there, and so on. We talk about all those things, but they aren't just at work autistic. These are just people who happen to also have to mask at work while going through.
It's just another level. It's another place that we also have to mask. And so what I talk about in terms of that whole masking piece is that when we are looking to return to our authentic selves, when we are looking to unmask, we have to do it in pieces like this. We have to go through our lives and be like, and I usually encourage folks to start at home, like start with your family. Some people find out they're autistic and their own family doesn't believe them. Their own family doesn't want to honor their truth. Their own family doesn't want to acknowledge the things that they would like shifted around them, right? And that's a battle that is a different battle than the battle of the workplace, right?
Right.
Because you don't get a paycheck from your folks, right? Like that's not how it works with your family, there's no payment involved. It's a different emotional piece. There's also spaces like school, right?
Yeah,
If we go for school
absolutely.
people, a bank, right? Your gas station is a shared space, all of those things. And so we're all choosing to mask, and we all mask differently in each of those places. And what we hope for our folks is that as they step into their authentic selves, the amount of spaces that they have to mask in becomes less and less. And we earn that courage when we do it space at a time. And for many of us, work is last because it's the riskiest, right? And it's the place where most people have been traumatized for their difference, have been punished even for their difference, right?
Have experienced
So
continuous anxiety,
all of it.
debilitating depression, all of that. Yeah.
So it's a big risk to think about disclosing in that particular shared space, right?
Yeah.
And so it often comes way after we build our confidence with our more local shared space.
Let me ask you a
But
horrible
that's
question then.
the ultimate. If we could all unmask at work and be ourselves at work, all of us human beings, right? How different would work be? It
Is
would just be a different
is it just at work?
animal,
If we could have mask everywhere and just be ourselves, what
right?
a collective sigh of relief we could all just humans.
Well, that's the whole thing that I think is most fascinating about autistic people is we don't do that. We don't understand that the play that everybody else is in. Like somehow they have a script and they know
Right.
what's happening, right? But we look at it and we go, that none of that makes sense to me.
No.
I cannot do that. It is illogical. And we stop, right? And so I look at what happened during like our huge pandemic and
Right.
I think, well, did anybody learn anything there? Have we taken a lesson from that, right? The world was turned upside down for every single one of us, not just for some of us, for all of us. And with that, what we thought about work and what we thought we needed to do at work also shifted,
Absolutely.
right? And all of a sudden we were like, wait, we can be a little more flexible. Wait, we can work remotely when everyone was asking for it before. Wait, we can do that. And oh, when we do this, everyone's not going to sit at home and not work. They're all going to do their jobs. Oh my God, right? And so, and it took that shift for everyone. And so that's where we are. I
Not
want to
that
hold
that
on to
landed.
that level.
I will dispute that that landed, unfortunately, completely anywhere. And there is an insane drive of these structures that are afraid and
Yeah,
wanting everyone to just go back to a set
go
normal
back
never
to,
existed.
right? Isn't
Yeah,
that,
yeah.
go back to quote unquote normal,
There was no
right?
normal, just this set
There was no,
imaginary set point that makes everyone feel a lot more comfortable in the workplace. I
and that's what it is. Yeah, right?
I would be surprised if they will be able to let go of it. What we saw, because I work in the organizational change sphere, if you wish, and it is a horrible place to be. I don't know what possessed me to be autistic and to be the canary in that part, but in that space, the ability to look at yourself, the self awareness at the top is inexistent, not because people are mean or stupid, but because people are tired, people are burnt out, people are afraid, and they are desperate. And I believe that across the board. If you look at the knowledge sphere of workers, I do 10 conversations a day with people, and it feels like the burnout layer is extreme. I think we are looking at, I say this all the time, and I am terrified that we're going to be coming into a few years of the ones of us that have found out of a late diagnosis going through, and those of us that have also been a knowledge worker at the same time going through effects that are very long lasting. And since they are now coming together at the same time as your climate change situation is happening, your politics are, let's not even go there, and on
right.
top of everything we are at the end of this pandemic, which as you well pointed out, it taught us some lessons, but it also left us absolutely depleted in a way that we haven't yet discussed. So
And so this is the part that worries me. Here we are, we're all depleted, but there was a lesson to be learned in there, right? But well, not everyone, I want to say it like that. Corporate has decided what the way to get through that is to push through, right? Not to stop, not to take a break, not to reassess, not to reimagine, but to go back to exactly the way it was. So what that tells me is that's crappy business. To me, I look at that scenario and I go, oh, you're not a very good businessman. Because if you are not being reactive to your marketplace, right? What business
The
are you
point of
running?
view.
Right? And so where are we headed then? And if we're trying to go backwards, that's not good business either. That's terrible business, right? Because your competitors are going to take you out. So now and these are like this is stuff, common knowledge in business. This isn't something that we all have to
No.
go see a specialist to find out, right? And that's where I think we're going to hit it. Because truthfully, even those people at the top level, even they are burned out.
Yes,
right?
that's where we
And
have the problems. Yeah,
right. And so what we need to do is say, yes, do you see how you feel?
we
Like
all
that,
do.
right? Don't you want that to not be? And in order to get there, we have to take some really big risks. And we have to make some really big changes in the way we look at our workplaces and what we're actually trying to accomplish there versus like, did you do your 8 hours? Right? So that
Changing.
we need to start shifting our
Going
big
back to
thing.
those genuine questions that we have had, the universe gave us a moment of pause to say, are you sure you want to keep doing this? Because you're
Yep.
doing it in virtue of inertia. You never checked anything, and your emperors are butt naked, and you don't talk about anything, and you just keep these people clicking here, and you look over their shoulder, and 80% is bloat, and the rest of them are dying. What are we doing here? And instead of taking that moment and saying, right, everyone, can we take a week to figure out what all are we making?
Right.
How do we make it so that we can all bring our best self to work? Because I need your best selves. That is what I bought.
Right? I don't want to pay you your salary to not do your best job. Again, good business,
Right.
right?
So now we have an option to go, what do you need? You need to be home. You need to be at the water cooler. You need to do a Thursday in the office. We make this new life. We have this opportunity to re-establish everything. And that is even if you discuss only the structure of the workplace and the systems and the processes and the insane inertia. But outside of that, you have to take a bigger look and say, but we are going to only be left with the humanity bit of it anyways. I say this every podcast these days. We're done with the other bits. We finished the theoretical stuff, and we've made the robots that are going to finish the things that are not done. So what we now need to do is these bits.
Reinvent
These
humanness,
bits,
right?
yes.
We need to decide, what do we want it to mean to be a human being, right? And it doesn't have to mean 9 to 5, Monday through Friday. That does not have to be the definition of what it means to be an employed adult,
No.
right? And that is the piece that I like. I don't know if we need to shove people out or if we need to right? But I know there's a generation, like I feel stuck in the middle is how I feel at my age. And I know there's a generation behind me that's as peeved about the things that I'm peeved about, but they're not going to just sit and take it.
That's the beauty of it.
They're the next.
That's where both
You know?
Becca and I are excited about. Look, we might not have the energy, and we were not 12 anymore, and I got to read so much about menopause. I don't got the time for this. But
I'm too busy being hot all the time
yeah,
to deal with.
if you heard what's on my list, you wouldn't want. But there's new people coming into the workplace, and do you know what? I was annoyed at first too. I'm sure most people were annoyed to see them because the shock and the difference between what we live through and what people who have had an early diagnosis understand to be needed for them to function is massive. And I think there's a piece of resentment that we should be honest and talk about, because those of us who are 40 and 50 and have got through life by hook or by crook, only God knows every day how we manage.
Right.
I'm feeling some type of way sometimes when people
Yeah.
have gotten it a lot easier.
Well, and I think too that some of this we could even go outside of the autism community and say there are a lot of people in the C-suite that also are jealous of the way that new business is going to be run versus the amount of hours that they had to put in to fly their boat or whatever it was, right? So we see that too, I think also.
Yeah.
But what I need to always remind people is like, yes, but yes, there is some of that, but that's on us to be healing from. That's not the fault of the new folks coming in, right? We don't have that chance. They have way more information than we had. They have way more self-awareness than we had. They have way more supports and services available, way more
Yeah.
knowledge, way more than we have, right?
We can't
And
take
we
it
can't
out
be
on them
mad,
for that.
right? Like we're not mad at people who, that always spent years using a rotary dial telephone and now we have cell phones. I'm mad about that. No, we move forward, right? And what we need to do is heal from that. Is say, you know what? We were denied the things we needed. Yep. We were not given the support. We were not validated in our realities all the time. We were traumatized, lots of things.
Yeah.
And the reason we're here is to make sure that nobody else has to have that happen again. Right?
Yeah,
Is
100%.
like
And that,
I will sit here and I will tell you how traumatized I am, and I will tell you the things that made me traumatized, and I will heal from them on my own because you can't change them. But I will leave a legacy behind, and I will share those stories with people because at some point, all of us are going to be gone because that's nature. And the next group of people have had a totally different experience with their day.
totally different. I think
Totally
this
different.
generation in between, like you say, indeed, they are going to. I am worried for them. You know, I have, I have a bunch of people I'm worried about, obviously, because that's what we do for a living, being autistic. But the littlest one we have is not yet 14. So I'm excited and worried in equal measures, if you wish. But I wanted to bring him up because I learned the term ableism from him. It's a few
Yes,
years
right?
ago that he has told me very clearly that he is not continuously proud of me for all these things that I'm pushing myself through. And it's a good few years that he has allowed himself to be honest and say, no, I'm not. I don't know why you necessarily need to be a perfectionist and kill at everything. And this is, in fact, not a point of pride, mother. This is ableist. And I remember the day that I thought, this is an ungrateful little kid. And then it took me 20 seconds to go, who is right? I
Right,
am
exactly, right? Because you have to say to yourself, and he's calling you out, right? And that's why I'm so excited for them to all grow up because they call you out already, and they're already know. And so what he's saying to you is, Mom, you shouldn't be proud of those things because you tortured
yeah,
yourself,
yeah,
right? You
not a plus.
tortured yourself to try to be perfect because that's what the world kept telling you. And he's saying, I love you more than that.
Mm,
I love you so much that I don't want you to have to feel like you have to be perfect in front of me all the time,
right.
or that you have to, get to the highest rung or whatever it is, right? You get to just be you. And I think that's right? Like when our workplaces respond to that attitude, what we think about work and how we do work isn't going to have a choice.
Right. That's
Like
amazing.
it's not gonna have a choice. When that kid grows up and is like, I'm not doing this job when
No,
you're lying to me right now. And they're going to be like, no.
it's just,
And that's right? I mean, it's gonna come. But
I love
and so
that.
what I think we have to do is say to her, honor the parts of ourselves that are, that didn't get what they needed for
Mm,
all of those years. That part of us that was just surviving, right? And
right,
not thriving at all.
right.
We got to honor that piece and we should share those stories. And that's what we do with that is share it so that people don't suffer from it again. But then we got to think, wow, we did such a good job though, because, right? Like the little kids wouldn't be talking about ableism if we all hadn't started pointing
Doing
it
it.
out. Right? And so it's really kind of cool to watch that coming and to know that it's
Right.
coming. And I'm sad that I don't get to experience it,
Well,
but I'm
it depends
also,
on where it lands, Becca, as well. I
yeah.
think the next few years are going to be crucial
Oh,
because
I
it
agree.
needs so much humanity to land on for these things to make sense that's not horrible to you. Okay, backtracking to that minor example I was giving you, my RSD. When my own child said I'm a perfectionist and he's not that impressed with being mentioned in the dedications of my 3 books, was through the roof. Yes. But equally, he was one, correct, and two, I knew that people like him who view, for instance, him and I have a conversation. I was going to ask your position about it. Always have this theoretical discussion between whether or not we should discuss the term of a disability, and I was going to bring it to you. I have an intrinsic reaction to it, which is negative. I will immediately react. I will say that, and I'm honest. It's very difficult for me because I've like the the value of being strong and of never being a victim is the only way you can get through multiple traumatic experiences when you're super autistic. So it's really hard for me to walk away from the idea of you're then not strong, you're then weak if you have a disability, right? So him and I have a lot of these conversations, and he takes it very personally that I would take away from him the fact that he actually does have a disability, and that he needs everyone to understand that. He genuinely has it inbuilt in his, I would say, identity now.
Who he is, right? That's the shift that I would love to see for those of us who are in this space. I happen to agree with your kid. I happen to think what happened to us isn't fair. Somebody took a word that means a thing and changed its meaning, right? And ingrained it into our brain, right? When I say the word disability, it doesn't mean the definition. It means weak, sick, unworthy, right? Someone else told us that. They lied to us. And that's the messed up part. And what is happening for you is it's cognitive dissonance, right? You were taught one thing your whole life, and that's what you use to survive, right? But then when your kid tells you the truth, right, they don't match. And that's hard for autistics to have happen in our brain. Really hard to have happen because that means we have to shift how we're looking at everything, right? And so what I had to really understand for myself is wait, what I'm really angry at is all of the people that when I was raised that taught me the wrong definition of the word disability, that let them take this word and make it mean something it doesn't, right? Kind of like what we did to the word accommodation, right? Take this word, make it mean something that doesn't, because the word accommodation by itself means doing something to make something easier for someone else. That's what it means, right? And now we make it, it has all these other legal implications,
Right.
So that word disability got co-opted, and it's our job as the disability community to take it back. Who are you to decide that the word disability means weak?
Right.
No, it doesn't. Here's what it says in the dictionary, right? That's not what it means. And what it does mean is that there are things about me that are different that make the things out in the world hard for me to do.
Right.
That's what it
things that other people expect to do and do easier are not as easy for us. And that is something that needs to be clear. And something that's difficult to make clear when you've spent your entire life hiding.
Right. Hiding and telling the conversation in your own head is the opposite of that. The conversation in your head is people can't see my weakness. They shouldn't see my difference. They shouldn't know. I should do my best to blend in. That's right. But the attitude in the world right now is no. Nobody should be blending in.
Oh
anymore.
God, what world do you live in, Becca? Bless your heart, because the attitude in some parts of the world.
That I look at these kids and I look at the world and I go, they are not about blending in anymore.
They aren't.
We see it in the vestiges of corporate America. We see it in universities still, the hierarchies and all of those things. But when we look at it with our logical brains, those setups don't always work. Right?
What about society construct? One of the things I don't talk much about over here, because this is about work mostly, is I have had a ridiculous period of my life. I don't even want to go into details, and I can't probably legally, but one of the things that has happened, part of that was, for instance, police brutality. And I believe that was 100% the result of the fact that I am autistic. Had I not been autistic, that would have absolutely never happened to me. And it spurred me on a research project that I hadn't done before. I've written about mental health extensively in my books before, but from a corporate perspective and from an employee perspective. But the distress of having to think of your identity while being in contact with vestiges of society that absolutely loves that identity is genuinely traumatic. And I am almost less worried about the kids in the workplace, because there is some type of an exchange that will have to happen, and if they don't want to offer anything, then the workplace will have to come up trumps eventually. But I am a lot more worried about society, And I am a lot more worried about civil society and civil rights and the capability of expressing yourself as an autistic person while disclosing you're autistic and getting the things you need. Because as I saw it, it looked like I could either be non-verbal autistic and then I would get some help, or I could be super high achieving 250,000 followers influencer and then I'm not autistic. I could not be these things to the
and
same.
this is our current legacy, is this miseducation about what the word autism means. What does it really mean? What do we mean when we say that word? So to you, when you say the word autistic, you have a much bigger knowledge breadth, right, of what that word means. Most people that we meet out in the world, unless they have a personal connection to autism, have a very vague, like, mainstream understanding of what autism is, right? And so they think that it's something you can see, for example, right? So even that concept of you don't look autistic enough is already an ableism. We're already in ableism territory the minute we go there, right? Because autism doesn't have a look. You can't see it. That's not true. What you see is the visible portions of that person that their challenges are. So I'm someone, my challenges, 90% of them that come with autism, I only experience them. They're internalized challenges for me, right? Like my anxiety, my sensory overload, right? Those kind of things.
Your RSD.
Some of our folks, right, have very visible support around that. They use an ADHD device, or they have a support person, or they need some kind of tool, right? And that's the piece that gets judged. So what we know about autism is the way that the world experiences autism, not how autistic experience.
Very true. Very true. And I love something you said there. I'll tack on it, even if it sounds horrible to people who really know what they're talking about. And I'm delighted by how out of it I am with some things. But the gender-wise, I struggled a lot with the gender topic because I'm the mother of a trans kid. That's not, unfortunately, that's now common knowledge. But and also because I've worked in a very male-dominated industry all of my life while being staunchly female because they can go F themselves. And but my kind of question is, obviously we all now know the fact that girls are underdiagnosed because we mask so much better and so on. I remember when this first came out, the first studies 10, 15 years ago, when they started talking about this the first time, I always thought, this makes perfect sense. All of the boys around me who couldn't sit still or could throw themselves around, I wanted to do those same bloody things.
Yes.
But they got to kind of feel their feelings and throw themselves on the floor. And I couldn't, because you can't in public. And I'm a girl and I'm supposed to be nice and sit in a.
That's what right? So right away, it's like, oh, there's rules, right? But they're not really real rules. So it's right. And so this is what we see is exactly this. When girls are, first of all, girls have a fully different experience growing up than boys do. It's a totally different experience, right? And it begins really early for us. We are expected from a very early age to know how to socialize for some reason. It's supposed to come naturally to us, but we don't expect that of boys. They don't need to worry about that. And then for some reason, we also expect girls to be quiet and keep our mouths shut and not have opinions. And we start very early on. What a good, quiet little girl you are. What a good, smart, quiet little girl you are, right? And so what we learn to do from that age is that's how we get positive reactions. And so we learn to put our needs all the way down here, right? Just for whatever. And we begin masking right then. It starts right away. For many people, it starts at home, the first practices with their grandparents, right? People who are more judgy around them, right? They will start masking. Boys don't really have to worry about that. The boys don't have to worry about being good communicators. Girls got to, right? Boys don't ever have to, we don't have to worry about that till they're about 15, I would say. Up until 15, it's perfectly acceptable, I think, socially, for a boy to decide to punch someone because he's angry at them, but not to yell at them. And if women yell or punch, we're crazy, right? We're dramatic. We're too passionate. We're too all of these things, right? So autistic or not, we are held to different standards.
Yeah, very true.
And what that looks like when you define autism as someone who's a non-speaking person with a behavioral disorder, which is what they said in the beginning, you're not going to see any of it. I was a good little girl. I just wanted to be left alone, reading the book that I was wanting to read, and everybody leave me alone so I could just sit in my corner. And what I was doing was classic isolation. I was isolating myself from everybody, protecting myself from everybody, not taking any social risks. I wasn't learning how to socialize either because I was isolating, right? And so all of these terrible things are happening to me, but I'm being such a good little quiet girl, right? And so I just kept getting, and so that's what I think.
surely praised both at home and academically, and there's positive reinforcement that keeps. It's the only dopamine we ever get
Right.
because
And
we
so
will learn. We'll sit in a
we learn
corner
it
and
and
do
we seek it from the outside world, and we also seek it from the girls we socialize
right.
with, which is why when girls talk about you behind your back, it's like the worst thing ever, right? Because it's like the dopamine wasn't real, right?
And the RSD
Um,
is through the
right.
roof.
And so it's a really complicated situation for girls, and in all of those ways, we learn to hide our needs in our symptomology, where boys are encouraged to express them.
Right.
And when boys who are not, who aren't maybe developmentally in the right place, it becomes really obvious
Mm.
to the outside world that they're struggling. Whereas it never becomes obvious for many girls that we're struggling the whole time, right?
Very, very true.
And that's what the bias and diagnosis did, was it separated that. They were genuinely looking for white 8-year-old boys who had a behavioral issue,
Yeah.
who were making issues in the class.
God knows how many. I have the same story as every other parent who took their kid 50 times and they kept going, no, no. This child
Right.
is looking into my eyes. I know that's irrelevant. Keep checking.
Right.
uh,
Right. That's the standard that people were given.
yeah.
And it's ridiculous because I can fake eye contact better than I don't think I've ever looked in my entire life in anybody's eyes for real.
It's difficult with my husband. Forget anybody else.
And so it's really like, right, like I'm uncomfortable doing it with my husband too. It's just weird to me. And when I think about the animals out in the world, it's weird to them too. Animals find it challenging and aggressive when you stare at them in the eyes, right? So it's like, maybe you guys are the weird ones for wanting to look in each other's eyes. It's a little weird, right? And so it's all of those things that I think, we're missing people because we had this very narrow view of what autism was supposed to look like. But now it's really expanded.
That's
And
good.
so
That is good and hopeful. It is good and it is hopeful. We are still rightfully terrified because the structures around us are literally not. There's I would say, for those of us that have gone through life being undiagnosed or diagnosed late, it's almost like a false sense of security. We have needed these accommodations all through, if you wish. We have needed potentially treatment all through and so on. But we've learned to have these structures in place and to still exist and to mask and so on and so forth. What I've seen and in my work with burnout, for instance, I've written a chapter on burnout in my last book, and looking at, for instance, my big bug is the conflation of burnout coming from work stress and burnout coming from autistic burnout. The incomprehensibly bad health crisis at play by mixing those two things. It just terrifies me that there are people out in the world on the absolute wrong treatment and so on. But this must be one at scale, and people must be masking on top of autistic burnout. And anyone listening to this who has experienced it knows that it is debilitating in worse ways by far than whatever type of momentary burnout you might face from extra activities. Because I mean, I'm not very good at explaining the science, but obviously once your brain has learned some mechanical ways of making connections, and then you have to re-examine all of them, they genuinely crumble. Your structures crumble. You find yourself without the capability of doing very normal day-to-day actions because your executive function is shot. It is genuinely debilitating. And I have coached maybe 20, 30 execs in my life in that situation. It's horrendous to be in that position. And, this thing that we keep hearing, being at the top is lonesome and so on and so forth, is triple true if you're autistic and you're at the top and you've masked through, and you haven't only masked to work, you've masked at home, you probably masked to your wife or your husband and your kids, and you have attempted your very absolute best to look like a normie for your entire life. And that burnout is genuinely worrying me. I wish people listening to this would go read more about it. Please, if you feel any of this and you feel like, this is not normal, I knew how to brush my teeth. All of a sudden, now that I am so overwhelmed, it's all happening, I can't even move my hand properly.
Right.
Once you feel yourself going there, that is genuine autistic burnout. Go talk to a real specialist, do some EMDR, some CBT, do something quickly, because I think if you let
And
go,
also, yeah, not only do something quick, but like don't do something quickly. Like stop. You need to
stop.
stop.
Yes.
Right. That's the other thing is like when you hit burnout, you have to stop. That the difference between autistic burnout and any other kind of burnout that you know about is it's a lengthy process. I don't know how else to explain it. You don't get into autistic burnout overnight. You don't. It doesn't take a week or a couple of months. No, it's like a years long stretch where then you hit a burnout place, right? And when you get to that burnout place, there are many signs, but one of the ones I hear about really often is that folks get into a space of apathy, where they no longer care about anything. Like no, kids don't care, job don't care, showering don't care, right? And that apathy is just a full exhaustion.
But they get
It's not
misdiagnosed as
I
a
don't.
depression immediately and wrongly treated with the wrong medication, unless you listen to Becca.
And it's that you're not, especially if you're not diagnosed, you don't know what you should be doing to make it better. So you're just doing what the only things you know how to do, right? And so you really can't get out. And so the thing about burnout is to understand it takes a long time to get there. It also takes a long time to get out. If you got there in 3 months, it's going to take you 6 months to get out, right? Like double it on yourself and treat yourself with that kindness. I know a lot of people who get into burnout and think if they take a week off or 2 weeks off, they'll be fine and they can go back to it. Well, no, what you did is you like recharged your little tiny battery just a little bit, and now you're going to go use it up again. And you're going to be right back where you are. And so you need to get your place where you have excess charge, right, to go back to thinking about working. And that takes taking things off your plate. And that I don't care means really I can't care about this right now.
Yeah.
I need help with it. Is really what we're saying.
But
I'm tired, right? And that's really usually a very early sign is that, and that we lose skills that we don't usually think that we're going to lose.
they didn't even know exactly. It
We
is.
lose our speech all of a sudden. I always tell people if I start to say to you, I can't find the English, that means I'm too tired and we need to stop because I'm right. I'm in a space where my brain has had enough and I can't find the words I need, right, to talk to you. So I need to stop.
Yeah.
There are very little tiny signs that you can be looking for, but we're so busy trying to survive out there that we don't.
You're probably not going to
to
stop to look at them. But when it
Right.
does hit genuinely, I have seen grown men debilitatingly unable to form sentences. It is difficult for us to express how incredibly dangerous this can be if ignored, because we have genuinely, as autistic people, spent an entire life building a structure that can then collapse, and then your job will be to rebuild it. And the beauty of it is you can build it differently. Hopefully you have enough love and support and people around to kind of come along on the journey. I say all the time, if you found yourself to be autistic, the probability you're the only one in your family is 0. So please go talk to the rest of your humans because they feel these things. And you don't have to approach them by saying we're all autistic. I've tried that once with my former mother-in-law. I don't know if she's still alive or not, but she was appalled. How very dare I say something of the sort about herself and her children? And I was like, but my child's autistic. I'm autistic. My husband's autistic. Your child's autistic. Why would you be so incredibly offended? So people will do that. Obviously, years and years of conditioning will not be helpful. But in one's family, the probability we are not part of an autistic family is very low, and eventually we can get to them. People will understand, if not the notion, they'll understand that feeling of we all feel RSD the same. We all hurt the same when we're rejected. We all experience anxiety the same. We just have debilitatingly more of it at every corner.
Right, and sometimes our causes are different, right? Like, weirdly, I will be unanxious to do certain things that other people are like, how are you not afraid? And other things, I'll be petrified, and people are like, you just did XYZ. How come you can't do, right? I don't know how come. I don't know, right? But that's because my brain is different. It's always the end of that conversation. I don't know. My brain processes things differently. So that's what happens. It's always the end of that. But I think it's really like we experience all of these human things. Being autistic doesn't take your humanness away,
On the
right?
contrary, I would say.
Right. What we did was we again decided that a word meant something that it doesn't mean. We again decided that the word autism means you're weak, you're this, you're that, you're right, or you're broken, or right, and we need to fix you is what we decided that word means. And it doesn't mean that. It has a definition, and that does not, we've co-opted it and chosen that. And autistic now are saying no. I am not a bad person because I'm autistic.
Right. And I am not less valuable, and my worth is no less. We're coming back to this word of worth, which I think it's really important for us, in particular as autistic people, to be very clear of. And I'm really passionate about the fact that the best project managers in my entire life I've ever met have been AU ADHD or ADHD or autistic in some fashion. The most quirky of inspiring leaders have been people who have been autistic. There's such an amount of facets of beauty in autism at work, that the fact that anyone would attempt to hide it once it's clear that it's not safe. It's not unsafe, sorry, because like Becca clearly said earlier, in some places it is genuinely unsafe to disclose. That once you know it's safe enough, companies should genuinely be excited to have you.
I do. And do we come, every person that you hire is going to have things that they're good at and things that they're not good at. And it's your job, right, to hire the best person for the job, for the things that they are good at, not for the things that they are not good at. And the thing that people don't like about autistics is that we will do the thing that we are good at all the time. We'll do it more hours than everybody else. We'll do it at 150%, right? Because we love it. We're great at the thing that we're good at. But as great as we are as the thing we're good at, we're terrible at the things that we're terrible at. And we go to work, and all people want to deal with us about are the things that we're terrible at, right?
But
and so what I like
even the ones we were great at, I'm interrupting you, is because I think I felt this in my career a couple of times, and I think everybody else might sometimes, which is I was told we love it when you run fast, but sometimes you've run so far ahead of the herd, we do not even see your tail. So it is genuinely a problem for many of us super perfectionist ADHDers who just want to do more and better and harder and top it and so on, because we then pull this entire amount of other people with us on a journey that's much harder to neurotypical people and not quite pleasant. So then that becomes a hardship in the workplace, to put it mildly.
I think that might be a really, really such an insightful thing to say, that I think it might be one of the number one maybe thing that is the most difficult about being autistic in the workplace. We are fast thinkers. We process a lot more information at one time. It's proven. We have the data. I will share with you the article that says that we process 42% more information. It's why we don't edit well. That's the same piece of us, right? And when we do that, we also see patterns. We see errors. We see ways we can be more efficient, right? And things that are broken. We can't help it.
We see unfairness.
Right. All of it, right? We can't help it, right? And it's really, really hard to be able to see those things, talk about those things to other people, and never have anything happen about it. Okay? And that's because we do that running so fast that they can't see our tail. We know the answer. We can see the problems. We know the answer. Just go there, people. Stop it. No, neurotypicals like 5 or 6 meetings in between know the thing and do the thing, right? And that's very frustrating for autistic. It's really hard. But what we have, I'm learning this too. I just had it happen to me again. is that we have to remember that we are going faster than them. Literally, we are going, like, thinking faster. It's not in an arrogant way. It's just the way our brains work. And so what we need to remember is that the way that we ask people to understand that we process differently, we have to remember it about them too. They really it's genuinely the way that their brains need to process it out. And so if we know the answer, we can save ourselves a lot of grief if we just give them their time.
I
just walk
love
away
that.
without thinking about it,
I love
right?
that.
And then let them catch up.
I love that. I mean, it's hard for us because no, I don't know any autistic person who's patient. I've
Right.
never,
Well,
ever
you're
heard
thinking
of.
about too many things all
I
the
just, I'll
time.
wait. I'm not in a hurry. I'm patient like that. That's like, but even without that virtue, it's absolutely the truth is a horrible lesson that I have to remind myself as much as I can, despite the fact that our company now, I positively discriminate and I only employ neurodiverse people. I don't care who's going to put me in jail for it yet. It hasn't happened, but I only employ
I think you have some
neurodiverse
time
people.
on that. I think you're
God forbid that that's right. but
good.
but because of that, I see such amazing breadth of humans that have such diverse qualities, and then it becomes an amazing game, not a game of collective game of how do we best combine these things
Right,
so
but
that
it
we
is
make amazing
it
things.
is a game. We have fun solving problems. I don't know what it is about the outside, but we genuinely, if you like, I love a good problem. I love to sit down with some chaos and make some organization out of it. I
Oh,
don't know why
a
my brain
list,
likes
a list.
a list, checking off lists and crossing them. Oh my goodness, it's like my favorite thing, right? I love it. And that makes it really easy for me to work with other people who are like that. And so the idea of working with other neurodivergent people is extremely appealing.
I love
Our
it.
brains are the same. Our communication is the same, right?
We don't
And so
lie to each other. We don't exaggerate. We're not overly politically correct for the sake of it because we're afraid not to. There's none of that. It's very clear and open communication. Sometimes people's feelings get hurt. We all talk about it together. There's
then we all
apologies. We
talk
move
about
on.
it, right? We all that's the thing. We'll all talk about, oh, so that person's feeling, oh, we didn't mean that. Oh, and in the middle of a meeting, we will all stop and say, right? And I don't see that happening in most other meetings. Most other meetings, someone's feelings get hurt, it just keeps going on, even if their behavior was unprofessional.
Yeah.
It'll just go on and maybe we'll talk about it after the meeting. But autistics, we stop in that moment and we say, no, this isn't okay. And if we have to come back to it, we'll come back to it. But we don't just keep going. And that it's just a difference in the way we process. And so weren't given the gift to work with other neurodivergent people our whole lives. And so when we do now, like when I get to work with other neurodivergent, oh my God, I'm like, man, my whole career would have been different if I had just worked with other
100%. Just
neurodivergent people.
talk to real people who would tell me the truth. Stop blanking emails. Just tell me
Right.
no or tell me yes or let's fix something together. It is genuinely when we made this decision to only hire when we can neurodiverse people, the way our business has gone has completely changed. We are completely remote. We don't have exact schedules. We just get shit done together and it's magical.
Right. Like that's to me a way autistic bottom line. Did the shit get done? Yes, it did. Then I don't care that you were up at 3 o'clock in the morning doing it. It doesn't bother me at all.
No.
Don't care what you do with your time.
Tell
Right?
me about the book
Now,
before we run out of time, Becca, because you and I are capable of talking forever and without ever pushing our books. I got the book out in October, didn't tell anyone. So tell me about your book. Don't do the same thing.
okay, I'm gonna do it right now. My cover's out of me. I always have a copy with me. So here is a copy of it. It's called Always Bring Your Sunglasses.
Love it.
It is my attempt to just share the legacy of what it is to be late diagnosed and what it looks like for those of us who grew up without a diagnosis.
Please read it, everyone. I'll make sure that I include the link as well. And you can find Becca on LinkedIn. Please chat to her. Not only is it an amazing lift experience, but she has this incredible energy and she is an absolute delight to have a conversation with. Thank you so much for coming over and for talking to us. Hopefully we'll have you back at some point. We have so much more to talk about. And you and I will be doing great things together, I hope. Absolutely. Your biggest fan. So thank you for today, Becca, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you so much for having me.